Hi, I'm Dr. Nick Galli. I'm the mental performance consultant for the U.S. Speed Skating National Teams, and on today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about social health. The difference with social health versus emotional health is that with social health, we're focusing more on how the individual interacts with people in their outside world, and how they themselves affect people in their outside world, as well as how they are affected by those people. Yeah, one of the common components of social health that you hear is social support, which we actually have quite a bit of research on in sport. There's also social integration, which is your feeling that you are an important part of your social environment. There's social acceptance, which is your feeling that you can trust other people in your environment. So there are a few different facets of social health. I think with any athlete, in terms of the relationships, you know, and the more competitive you get and the higher you move up in your sport, more of your relationships, more of your primary relationships are naturally going to tend to be in sport with coaches and your teammates, and I think that's okay. One thing that I recommend, and it does get harder as you get older and more competitive, is that you try and hang on to a relationship or a network of relationships that has nothing to do with your sport, nothing to do with speed skating, because it can become all-consuming, and it's really nice to be able to, you know, take a couple hours out of a week and interact with people that know nothing about speed skating. Can be really refreshing, I think. What I've seen with the athletes I work with is that church and their religion can be a good source of social support and social acceptance outside of speed skating or outside of sport. The family unit, depending on your family dynamics, can be, and old friends that you had, you know, and the friendships that you developed outside of speed skating over the years can be, and these days you can meet people that have similar interests to you. It's very easy with social media and different groups and people who have similar interests and hobbies. You know, so I think, you know, there are many examples of social networks that you can have outside of speed skating. I think if you find yourself feeling kind of stale or burned out in terms of your social interactions, or not really being motivated or wanting to affiliate or associate with people that you ordinarily would, that could be a sign that maybe you need to broaden a little bit and spend some time with some other people and on some other relationships. I think maintaining contact with people from back home is important. I think, if at all possible, trying to strike up relationships with people of a similar age outside of skating, and maybe that could be religious affiliation or church group. So I think it is important, but it can be challenging. And one thing I find myself doing more of is working with these young athletes on healthy relationships and healthy communication and productive communication with each other and with their staff and coaches, because they haven't necessarily been in a position to learn that, and they're not on the same developmental track that, you know, your standard teenager might be. So you have to be a little bit more intentional about doing that training. I think trust can become a rare commodity, or seem like it becomes a rare commodity when you become elite, because you're constantly in competitive mode. And in our sport, in speed skating, you are often training with your competitors, and you're sharing staff and you're sharing coaches, and a sense of paranoia can develop, which generally isn't a good thing. I think you have to have a healthy sense of protecting yourself and making sure that your interests are being served. But generally speaking, people are not out to get you. And I think I see more of that than I would in a typical teenage athlete out here, because it's a bit cutthroat. And I think what comes of that is it can sort of shift your worldview in an unhealthy way, to where you don't trust anybody. And if you don't trust anybody, now who are you going to rely on when you need social support? So I think it's important, I guess, from the environment, in terms of the parents and coaches, that the athletes do feel like they're in a safe environment where they're valued and where they're respected, and where there is trust. And when that trust is broken, I think having a healthy way of dealing with that doesn't include just deciding, well, I don't trust anybody, because that's the common response. I think you get burned by one person and you feel like, well, I'm not going to trust anybody, and now you've closed yourself off. So I think really supporting young athletes in knowing that, hey, at times you're going to get burned. Hopefully it's not too bad. Now maybe you know some ways that you can better protect yourself. But by and large, everyone in this world is trying to help you. Even your competitors, you're out there with them trying to make each other better. Probably so. I mean, I think all of us do in some ways, but they have a similar issue as their children. You become embedded by proxy in that environment, and your social network slowly becomes your son or daughter's teammates and their parents and the coaches and that world. And so I would have similar advice for parents, in that it's important to stay diverse in your social relationships. Don't make your only primary group the sport group. Make sure you still have other primary social groups. And then just in terms of the parent-child dynamic in sports, one of my rules of thumb is that the mom-dad parental unit should never care about the sport more than their son or daughter does. They should support, but if you're finding your sense of self-esteem and social well-being tightly connected to what's happening out on the ice, that's probably a sign that you need to take a step back and maybe reconnect and reignite some other social networks that you had before. I'm always asking our coaches, hey, what are you doing to de-stress, to decompress, to get away from this, just for their emotional health. Socially speaking, you hope that they have good support at home. And then one thing I would mention that I think goes for parents and coaches is, yeah, it's good if you can have other non-speed skating relationships, but we also know that sometimes that's not as feasible. But at least if you have a network of people within that world who you can get together and support each other, and I think this goes for coaches too, especially because you have similar challenges, make sure you've got one or two trusted coach colleagues, whether it's within the team that you're coaching or even from other teams, because you all understand each other better than anyone else would. So if you don't have a lot of time to connect with other people from outside the world, at least have trusted colleagues from within your world that you feel like you can turn to. But I think in the season, you probably have to think about it differently than out of the season. In the season, you might not be able to expect to be able to do as much outside social work as you would out of season. So even if that means every Sunday is a non-speed skating social day, I'm only going to do things with friends and family that we're not doing speed skating. I'm going to work on other parts of myself. When it's out of season, you might plan trips or more things that are more involved that help you to rejuvenate yourself. that again are with groups of folks that are not in speed skating. I would say every day you should try and take, you should try and define when you're turning off speed skating, especially when you're young in the sport. I think that does get harder as you get more elite, but if practice is over at 5 and you're home by 5:30, you use the time in the car to sort of say, okay, speed skating, transitioning out of that and into dialogue and interactions with my family, or watching a show with my family, doing something with my brother, doing something with my sister, talking to someone. I was gonna say on the phone, but these days it's probably social media. So maybe sort of I think what can be useful on a day-to-day basis is having a start and stop point for speed skating life and turning on another dimension. So if you're interested in learning more about this topic or other topics related to psychosocial health in athletes, I have a book. It's called Psychosocial Health and Wellbeing in High-Level Athletes. It's available online on Amazon through Routledge Publishers. Came out in 2019, and I think it might have some, it's got a lot of current research, but also some useful tips on how to promote well-being in your athletes.